that I'm sorry you have to listen to all of it because it was cracking me up. But welcome to MS Office Hours. Today is Thursday, April 3rd. I am one of your hosts. Our hosts are not available this week, so you get me, Heather Cox. And as I mentioned, Rob stepped up last minute. Will did some great prompting to give us some fun with his title and pictures. But Rob, let's listen to this jam, okay?
All right. Thanks, everybody. Just sit back, listen for a minute, and then we'll get started. Thank you, everybody.
I died. I absolutely died when they sent that to me. I was like, if there is any crowd that will appreciate that, it is this group. So, Rob, I'm going to turn my mic and camera off. This is
All
your
right.
show. Thank you so much for filling in for Will today. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. And thank you, everybody, for listening to our amazing theme song provided by one Will Thomas. Today, we are going to be going on a journey of data governance for SharePoint using SharePoint Advanced Management. If you have any questions as we're going, put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them afterwards. Or if Will is able to help out, that's fine too. So why are we talking about this? With Copilot and SharePoint, oversharing in SharePoint and OneDrive in the team's backend to the team's SharePoint backend is a problem. So with Copilot, organizations are facing new challenges regarding the, over permissions of content and data sharing. Copilot is able to access and leverage information across your tenant. And if you're like me and you've been doing SharePoint administration for a long time, you know that some of these tenants, they started off as the Wild West. You tried to get them locked down, but then, Copilot comes along and you're running the risk of having everything sort of being presented in Copilot. Yeah. So, it's something that we all face. So, we're looking at different things like the ability for users to access information beyond what they need, inappropriate sharing of content, people just slapping everybody on everything and out of date or relevant responses. And by using SharePoint Advanced Management, it'll help address these situations so that you can have your information be more appropriate for end users and have it be, so that they're accessing what they should be able to access. Some common causes of Copilot oversharing in SharePoint, as you see here, we've got some images. We all know, privacy settings, stuff being set to public. Default sharing option is everyone, broken inheritance for permissions, use of the very old everyone except external users domain group and sites and files without sensitivity labels. I know for a fact a lot of sites that I have seen in the past and worked on, that was just a favorite, that everyone except external users group, and it pulls in every account in your Active Directory except the guest users, and just gives them all whatever access you give that group permission. So that's a big one right there. So, Will.
Yeah, I want to point out one thing and then I'll be quiet, I promise. On
Okay.
that everyone except external user group, the reason that's such a huge deal is if you were to share a file and use the anyone group, Copilot's not going to see that unless the user clicks on that link. If you use that
Correct.
everyone except external user group, Copilot sees it, regardless of whether they've clicked on it, know it exists or not. So if we're using that group on things that it shouldn't be used with, that's a huge oversharing issue that we can fix easily.
Yep. And we'll talk about fixing that later on, thanks to your slide deck. All right. Yeah, and that's a very valid point, because that anyone group, that anyone listing, they'll only be able to get a link to they'll only be able to access it once they click on the link. They need the link in order to be able to access it. So getting your data governance house in order with SharePoint Advanced Management. So we're going to give you some steps in order to be able to use SharePoint Advanced Management and be able to help mitigate some of these issues that you may be seeing. So what we have laid out are 5 steps to SharePoint data governance. Going through all of these, you'll be able to have a more secure environment for your data. We're going to go through all of them. So step 1 is going to be reducing accidental sharing. Step 2 is going to be cleaning up stale content. Step 3, identifying sites with potentially overshared content. Step 4, controlling access to content. And step 5, taking proactive measures on business critical sites. Digging into step 1, reducing the accidental oversharing with SharePoint settings. So you can minimize new instances of oversharing via Copilot. So some of the things you're going to want to look into, or have your SharePoint admins look into, is updating the sharing link default company-wide to specific people at the site, tenant or site level. And this is something, if you've ever sat on a call with me, I pretty much tell everybody to do this. Always have it set to specific people. So they have to specify that by default. Going through those settings in the tenant are going to be super helpful in order to help mitigate some of that right out of the gate. Also, you are able to hide the everyone except external users claim. And I think I pulled this up. Yeah, here we go. So I'm going to put this in the chat for everybody, but you're able to run this PowerShell commandlet, and what this will do is hide everyone except external users from the people picker, so people can't just use it on sites. I want to stress, though, it doesn't work retroactively. So it's not like it's going to remove it from all the sites it's been used. It's going to prevent people from using it moving forward. So it's something that it's a PowerShell commandlet you can run. I'll put that in the chat as well. So if you run that, if one of your SharePoint admins runs that against your tenant, it will basically hide it from the people picker, preventing people from using it. Yeah, and so this just talks a little bit more of that. You also want to educate admins on the site level controls to limit sharing. So this is, if you go to the gear, top right-hand side, you're a site owner, you can control who on the site can share. So if you see here in the screenshot, this will allow you to either allow site and members to be able to share files. You can allow site and members site owners and members and people with edit permissions to share files, or only the site owners to share files. And that's at the site level when you're working with the site. So, not only can your SharePoint admins control, the sharing for the tenant level, your site owners have some responsibility as well, where they can control who, when they're accessing the site, can share content. And so getting into a little bit about SharePoint Advanced Management, it's going to be part of Copilot, as we've talked before. There's been a little delay in the rollout, so that is going to be coming. You're able to get reports to identify stale and potentially overshared content and control Copilot access. And it has scalable actions, so you can delegate a lot of that governance to your end users, as we'll talk about later on. There's a lot of reports where, you run it and then you have your site owners go in and tell you what's going on with the site, what the access is for the site, things like that. And if you're like me and you've been doing SharePoint since 1982, you really wish this stuff had been around back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when we were doing on-prem and everything was a nightmare. So another thing that we can we're going to have is cleaning up stale content. So there's the inactive sites policy. So this is reports that you can run in Copilot, where you can generate a report that says, okay, this site has been inactive. I think it goes anywhere from 30 days to 6 months. And you can generate that report in 2 different states, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You can run it as a simulation, or it will generate an email out to your end users, basically saying, hey, this site hasn't been used. You need to attest to it. And then it takes some action depending on what you choose from there. We also have the site ownership policy that's going to be coming up. This is something where you can find sites that don't have any site owners anymore. Again, I hate to keep saying that I'm been doing this a long time, but I've been doing this a long time, and you end up with sites where, they're using it, but, employee A won the lottery and they're painting coconuts down in Florida. And then employee B left the department or left the company also, and they're gone. So you don't have any owners anymore. So now you have a report also that will allow you to see what sites don't actually have owners anymore. You combine that with the inactive sites, and if you see that it's still very active and it doesn't have site owners, then you can, take some action on it to be able to see what's going on. This is going to be especially helpful. Both of them are especially helpful when you have very large environments, which I see quite a bit in talking to customers. So with the site ownership policy, this addresses the managing of sites that no longer have site owners, where nobody's actually in charge of the site. You have people going in, they may be updating content, but nobody actually owns it. The inverse being, you have sites that are really old, nobody owns it, and it's just sitting out there. This will give you some, context into, what may be going on with those sites. And as you see here, this starts getting into generating those reports where you're able to, configure it so that you can see, okay, going through this slide, you can see who should be responsible, what is the minimum. You can determine who the policy should invite to become a site owner or admin, so you can go through that as well. And then you can take an action on it. And that's one of the good things with these reports, is you are able to take an action. I know with the inactive reports too, you can flip it to read only. And if you've got the archive feature, the 365 archive, which is like another paid feature, you can actually have it just archived off if you want. But usually the read only is just sufficient enough. And then this is getting back into the inactive site policy. So there, you don't want to have inactive sites out there, and especially you don't want to have old data out there, because Copilot is going to be able to access it. It's going to be able to give you information. You want current data, you want current information, you want it to be up to date as possible. So running the inactive site reports will give you some sort of insight into that to be able to give you more information. So again, it works similar. I mean, you can get similar information by going to your admin center, going to your active sites, and then seeing when the last activity date was. With this allows you to actually be able to take actions on it as well, as opposed to what we used to have to do is just download the CSV and then start emailing people. You're able to generate this and have it email them for you, where they have to attest to it, and then you'll be able to see on the report who's attested and who hasn't. And you can also set the policy scopes as well. So one of the good things is with the inactive sites, you can choose what sites you're looking at. So when you go through, you can choose the period of inactivity. You can also select what type of sites you look at. So one of the things you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to ignore all the team sites, but if you have your end users being able to create their own sites, you can have it look at that. You can also exclude sites. So if you can exclude like your human resources sites and your higher level sites and things like that. So you're able to go through a scope of different sites and be able to pick and choose which ones you want to be looking at and which ones you kind of want to ignore. And again, this is just getting more into that policy where you see here, as we were talking about before, you can take some actions. And again, you can flip it to read only if you want. If you're paying for that 365 archive, you can have it archived off. And I'm going to try to speed it up because I know we got 12 minutes left and I could talk about this all day long. You can also configure the email that gets sent out. So you're able to say, okay, we want you to do this and take this sort of action on this when the end user gets it. So you'll be able to see this. And then again, you can run this in simulation mode or active mode. So if you want to test out your policies, which I would highly recommend, you can run it in simulation where it won't do anything, but it'll give you an idea of what's going on. Now getting into the data access governance reports, these are great because this is going to show you what is going on. And we do recommend, and I'll put this in the chat before we begin. And this is something we've talked about amongst ourselves. There's a baseline report you can run via PowerShell. And if you want more information on that, then I have time to talk to in here, feel free to reach out. But basically the baseline report will give you an idea of what's going on. One of the things with these reports is they give you, I think it's like last 28 days. The baseline report will give you everything. It takes a few days to run. It'll give you everything that's going on. And then the report you can download that will be able to show you what has been shared, what's going on with the environment. And then from there, you're able to download that information via PowerShell in order to get an understanding of what is going on in your environment. And then you'll be able to get these snapshots where you'll be able to look at what's going on based off the data access governance reports you can run. And then we have your site access reviews. So this is going to be helpful after you run the data access governance report. You can actually push it back to your site owners and say, hey, you need to attest to this. I'm seeing a lot of sharing going on. Here's the report. Tell us what's, you take a look at it. And if, again, haven't been doing this for a while, it's a lot better to do that and put it on the site owners than being, the one of 3 admins that may be running all of the 365 environment and having to chase everybody down and trying to get an understanding of what's going on. So this is the email that you'll see that will, will say to them, hey, you need to attest this. You need to tell us what's going on. You need to be able to verify what sharing settings might be happening. So at that point, they're able to attest to that. And again, you're going to get some end users and go, well, I had no idea. I just inherited the site. I just got made a site owner. You can work with them, but at least you get the ball rolling on that. And then here, this is getting more into the permissions. So you can see sites that have broken permission inheritance, ones that are containing sensitive data. Default sharing option is everybody, what different permissions that are going on. So they're going to get an idea of what is going on their own sites. And step 5 is to take proactive measures on business critical sites and locking them down. So we have things like the block download policies that you can set up. So this is in addition to anything you might have in Purview. It's a PowerShell command that you can run against a specific site where you can say, okay, don't allow any downloads from this site. And you see on the PowerShell command lid here. So you would put that in, indicate the site URL, create the block download policy, and it's all set. And then the site banner will notify that downloads are not allowed. And you'll see there's no download option for this user. So that's going to be the end user experience. In addition to that, we have the restricted access control. Now, this one, I'm going to stress, I always treat this as a temporary measure. So this is something you can set. So if you have sites and you find out that they've just gone Wild West and they're just sharing with everybody in the organization, including everybody in environmental services, maintenance, and everything else, you can use restricted access controls to lock down the site while you're trying to get it fixed. And by doing that, what you'll end up being able to do is grant access to only specific groups. So you can give it access to like the owners and the members, who may be the people that are actually working with the content, and have that locked down to only them, regardless of what the site permissions are, so that they can keep working. And then you can work with your site owners to clean up those permissions. And then they'll get this access. If they don't have access, they'll get this access denied if they're not part of one of those security groups. And then once you get it cleaned up, you can lift it and you're all set. And again, this gets into the restricted access control policies. So this is talking about the transparency that's needed in the governing practices. So making sure you're communicating out with everybody what it is you'll be doing. And again, to reiterate, use a site level setting to restrict the content discoverability. Set this property to a site via PowerShell commandlet. There's no change to site permissions. Site content gets reindexed as this is restricted content discovery. So with this, you're able to use a site level setting to restrict content discoverability via Copilot. It's set using this PowerShell commandlet that you see down the bottom here. There's no changes to site permissions. The site content gets reindexed. As a result, the contexts are not security trimmed and not discoverable via Copilot or the content-wide search. And as you can see here, this is giving some different examples. The before and after comparison implementing the SAM framework illustrates the transformative impact by structuring data governance. By adopting these practices, organizations can significantly improve their data management process, leading to enhanced security and compliance. And I think that's the last slide. I think that's all we got. Any questions for me? Any tomatoes you want to throw?
You know, the best part is that James set me up in the chat for my unified plug. So Rob, like James and many others that were on this call, they are all part of Unified. They can help you with those different pieces and parts. So yeah, so if you need things, we will get you the slides. The slides have been asked for, so we will get the slides to you. And then, yeah, what I will probably do is, yeah, I'll send it, because y'all know how the internal, external, what I'll do is get, maybe I got it. I'll put a link to it in the YouTube recording in the description. So I don't have to email everybody 50,000 times, because I just emailed y'all the student information. And I'll get the YouTube recording up as quickly as I can for you as well, so you can have both. Sound like a plan? Okay. All right. There are a couple of questions. So if someone sets anyone with a link can edit or read this, that will be discoverable via a random internal person with Copilot search.
No, if it's an anyone link, so that's where it gets fun. The anyone link. So if you set it to anyone, you share it with anyone, or you do copy and it says anyone with this link, they literally have to have the link in order to be able to access the file. So if they don't have the link and they haven't clicked the link, there's no, I don't know what the good term for it is. Will and James, keep me honest. Like you have it doesn't create like instance of an object of a sharing object.
If you remember way back in the day with SharePoint, you had like user information lists that you tied you to a site or something. It's basically the same thing. It ties you to that document.
That's so it's once the user clicks a link, that link, then it would show up in their Copilot searches because they've seen it.
It's indexed at that point for your view. That's the key. It indexes it.
To give a perspective, you'd also be able to see, like, if you went into manage access and then went into more manage access into the old school view, you'd be able to see their name under that as like additional people may have access.
Now, here's the fun twist out of this, and this is why I always call it out. While it doesn't index it and Copilot won't discover it for your view unless you've clicked on it, if someone shared a folder with that anyone link 5 years ago and you clicked on it, and now they started putting sensitive info in that folder, it's discoverable by you. You can search and find it. Copilot can find it. So if you've had some lingering anyone links that are out there, or everyone except external users, again, this is where SharePoint Advanced Management comes in. It's going to help find it all for you, and even that older stuff.
And bear in mind too, if that link was shared with them and it was like a folder, to James's point, all they'd have to do, even if they didn't bookmark it or anything, all it would take them going into OneDrive under shared, and it's going to show there, because the OneDrive, the shared section in OneDrive on the browser is going to show everything that was shared with you and by you. With you and by you. So, it'll be very easy for them if they're just bored one day poking around to be able to go, oh, I never looked at this. Oh, hey, there's payroll information.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I will try to get this recording posted as quickly as possible, and we will then get the slides to you as well. But thank you all, and I am so glad that we got to enjoy that absolute SharePoint jam in the beginning. I kind of feel like we may need to, create those at least once a month. And that's part of the way that we advertise our product. It's like kids songs. New idea, y'all. Kids songs for Microsoft products,
I could talk to the studio musicians if you want, and we can make that happen.
I feel like we need it. It's just like, it's going to be like a full album of Microsoft. Like, let's get this on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. And, it's just like for those of us who want to rock out and learn, it's kind of like, I gotcha. It's kind of like Hamilton. Hamilton really taught us about the American Revolution. There's so many things we now know because it was put to music. Yes, the Microsoft version of Schoolhouse Rock. So I'm loving this idea. The elementary school teacher inside of me is just exploding with excitement. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're literally going to do that. Sorry about your luck. We'll make you a playlist and it'll be amazing. But thank you, everybody. And we've got our friend Bill Bales coming back next week. He's bringing his friend Tony. They're going to talk to us about Copilot some more. Shocker, Copilot. So we will see you again next week. And if you haven't already signed up for Club Copilot, do it and join us on Tuesday for round 1. We have Copilot in project. We have a project manager, program manager, project manager. Anyways, we have a real expert. She will be here and she will be talking to us. So join us on Club Copilot and bring your golf attire if you have some. Or just come as you are, because we take you any which way you are. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to kick you out so that I don't have to watch the little things sit there because somebody walked away. Bye, y'all.